Everybody who watched the first debate knows that Bernie just dominated, obliterated everybody on that stage. Let's be honest. Tim Ryan, if I recall, just quit his campaign. And it's because Bernie ended his career. Man, by the way, on behalf of the progressive movement, Tim Ryan, we really appreciate your contribution. Really, you've done more than almost anybody else. In just less than a month, you let Tulsi make a name for herself by utterly obliterating you. And then the very next month, you let Bernie do the same thing. So, hey, we appreciate that. Good look, man. We love you over here in the progressive movement, no matter how crazy you are. Taliban attacked the Twin Towers. Boy, you funny. Anyway, Bernie did clearly win that debate to such a degree that Elizabeth Warren was literally walking behind him with a little fake steering wheel riding his coattails all the way to his victory. Now, even though all of us who watched the debate would probably agree that Bernie Sanders did, of course, win, Quinnipiac had another result. Yeah, the polling came out, and somehow, some way, Biden is leading again. Yeah, that's true. Biden is still leading. He's still leading. And according to this, Biden's leading 32. Sanders only has 14 percentage points. Harris did drop to 7%. Mrs. Top tier candidate. That's a 7-point drop, by the way. And then Warren skyrocketed to 21%, which means that this poll has Warren polling ahead of Bernie. Wow. Quinnipiac, I'm not going to lie to you, bro. Not going to lie to you. Your credibility has become all but shot here. This poll even has Yang at 1%, even though prior he was at 2-3%. He's averaging at close to 3%, 4% in most of the polls. But even still, Yang in his debate did better than Biden, in my opinion, Warren, and Buttigieg. Definitely had the best closing statement, and yet they have Klobuchar and Castro polling at the same rate as Yang at 1%. Come on, bruh. I keep forgetting Klobuchar participated in the debate. Let's be honest. So, how is it that that Bernie can be getting beat by both Elizabeth Warren and Biden, even though he was a clear winner? Well, let me be honest with you. It's because they're full of it. I don't know how else to put it. They obviously oversample older voters, right? They obviously have a bad habit of mostly calling people on their landlines. They usually, I didn't even check this one because it doesn't matter, because my overall point will be made in a second. They usually don't. The way they ask questions is a little weird at times. If enough people say that Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren is their second choice, it'll read on their poll that, oh, this person's name was said more often by this group of people, Democratic leading voters in this case, and so we're going to just say that that's the person they pick. Like that's all ways that are used to manipulate the polls. Now, why am I bringing up Quinnipiac polls specifically? Other than the fact that this information just broke today, it's also important to remember Quinnipiac's 2016 and 2015 polling. Around this time, a little bit later, actually. You know what Quinnipiac said in 2015? November, actually, specifically, of 2015? They said Hillary Clinton had a, 57% chance of winning? And that Bernie Sanders was polling at 4%. Yeah. Bernie Sanders was polling at 4%. Now, mind you, this is after the debate where he was the most searched candidate. This is after it had already been established that as far as turnover rate is concerned, if you learn who Bernie Sanders was, because that was his biggest obstacle back then, if you learn who Bernie Sanders was, it was almost like instantaneous. You were a voter. That was after the massive crowd turnouts. Huge rallies in Charleston, California. I want to say he had one in Chicago by that point. I want to say he had one in New York by the end of November. I mean, the rallies were massive, and that's indisputable. And the money, the fundraising wasn't even, it was nowhere near what it is now, but it was still his individual contributors were skyrocketing and on the rise. And on top of all of this, there was really no other competition for them to justify that somebody would be taking that much polling away from Bernie. And even if there was, let's be honest, his message was so unique at the time that it's ridiculous to believe that he was only polling at 4%. Now, in November, he was polling at 4%. I think you already know how the story ends. By the Iowa caucuses, which I believe took place in either late February or early March, Bernie goes up against Hillary Clinton, ties her 49% and 49%. Now, even after he ties Hillary Clinton at the Iowa caucus, there were other polls that were put out obviously after the Iowa caucus where Bernie was still being told that he was at, like this one, for example. This is by Fox News, 3%. They said he was at after the Iowa caucus. Another one by Quinnipiac again, 8%. Another one by CNN, 5%. This was after the Iowa caucus, after he had done extremely well. But you see what I'm saying? So this really touches on a larger issue of the polls being used to select who can and cannot enter the debates. That's ridiculous. Maybe if you wanted to use either the polling or the fundraising for the first set of debates, absolutely. But in the tiebreaker situation that they had with Mike Gravel, which was used to keep him off the stage, they said that Gravel didn't reach the polling threshold, and therefore Bullock gets the stage. But Bullock didn't get individual donors, 65,000 individual donors. So quantitatively, we can deduce that clearly he did not have more support than Gravel, and more people did not want to see him than they wanted to see Gravel. And I'm almost willing to bet that was a straight lie. Bullock just was not doing better. To say that Gravel didn't have 1% in 3 polls was ludicrous also because there were multiple polls that they used that had 1%. And then what happened was they were changing polls at the last minute. When I had talked to one of the teens in Miami, they already had 2 polls. They had 2 of the polls. And as his support began to swell, all of a sudden, he didn't meet the polling requirement, despite getting almost 15,000 individual donations in like the course of 2 to 3 days. The polls are illegitimate. And if you think that these polls are going to determine the outcome of this election in any way other than seeing who qualified for the debate stage, you're setting yourself up for failure. Bernie is not at 14%. Any mainstream media journalists claiming this to be true it's weird that you don't see anybody, like nobody in the mainstream is talking about this critically. Nobody, for whatever reason, is using historic data to dispute or refute the claims being made or perpetuated by these polls. Nobody is using this to refute the credibility of these polls. We know how the election how the election eventually ended up. We know that Bernie didn't win, but he probably really won. We know that, like in this particular election, we know Biden historically, look at the last 2 debates. You don't even have to attack Biden. Biden attacks himself. Despite Bernie having more individual contributors, not only overall, but take any state you want to, Bernie has more individual contributors. So why is it, once again, that people are pretending that these polls are legitimate in any way. Bernie probably is closer to 35 or 36%. Let's be honest. Biden is probably closer to 14%. I could actually see Warren really being between 18 and 20%. I can legitimately see that. But once again, that's because I do understand that Bernie would probably closer to 36%. And Warren has been riding his coattails so hard that it does make some. Warren has been riding the coattails. Kamala just got dismantled by Tulsi, and Warren basically left that particular debate unscathed. And so because of that, I can honestly see her, from the identitarian voters of the left, polling her around 18 to 21%. But that's with respect to Bernie being at 26% and not even being close to Warren, and everybody else basically falling by the wayside. These polls are just ridiculous. And I just had to share that with you because, once again, come on. Nobody believes that nonsense. At least you should not if you have any freaking sense. That's for sure. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button to get all of our notifications if you like that episode of Mikasa Sukasa. You can also help continue to grow our show by donating to our Patreon and helping us hit our goal of 500 patrons. But remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.